All right, so part 2 of healthy boundaries. So as we know, again, when we're working on healthy boundaries, it's important, and in fact, I'm going to go ahead and get another image here. There we go. So I will go ahead and do these images for both men and women. And you can see this is a gentleman that I did his image for with the healthy boundaries. His boundaries are a little more packed, a little bit stronger, or more brighter, self-compassion, and then healthy selfishness off to the sides. But the idea here is the same, right? So the idea with this is that in healthy boundaries, we're going to go ahead and say no to anything that depletes us and yes to anything that feeds us or has us feel good about ourselves. We're going to make our decisions from our choices from a place of I matter, not more than anyone else. It's just that nobody else is living our life. So we get to make our own choices as to what is right for us. And so we get to ask ourselves, what is right for me inside of self-care? Self-care is our number one job. And I'm going to ask myself from this part of my body, my intuitive knowing. People think that the heart actually is where the emotions reside. Your emotions are in the center part of your brain, your hippocampus and your amygdala. Those are your emotional centers. They act as a filter so you can understand everything else that's going on with the body. When you listen to your intuitive knowing, you're going to have a sense for, you're going to feel that this is what's right for you. You're also going to answer the question and ask yourself, and then follow through with it, what is one thing I can do right now to take care of me? And inside of that, I'm then going to go ahead and take these actions. So with healthy boundaries in mind, after I set the healthy boundaries with my father, I then had to go on with healthy boundaries with the rest of my family, specifically with my brother and then with my mother. So one of the things about my relationship with my brother, who is younger than I am, is that unfortunately, for much of our life, he would yell at me and call me names. I would get triggered by this and get upset. And so I would yell back at him and call him names right back. It never went the way we wanted to, but it was almost like we just couldn't get to a place of love and respect for one another when this was going on. So I was on the phone with him one day and I told him, Jonathan, I'm working on really creating for myself these healthy places for my self-care. And one of the things that I really see is that it is not okay for me to have people yelling at me and calling me names. So I'm going to let you know that if there's any yelling or calling me names, I'm going to end the conversation and then we'll give it a week and we'll try it again next week. So for my self-care, this is what I need to do. He was kind of like, oh, that sounds nice and so forth. He had questions about it, yada, yada. However, it really, again, was nothing that I was going to argue with him about or try to explain. It was just something that I needed to do for myself. So we got into the conversation about 5 minutes in, and he starts getting upset with me. Now, what I know is that Jonathan loves me so much, my brother loves me so much, that he wants me to be powerful. And if I'm struggling in an aspect of my life, he gets upset with this. He really thinks that I need to really, again, take on my power. Now, another way of thinking about that is men, unfortunately, are challenged when it comes to us women in just listening to us. They want to fix it, right? And the unfortunate part is that it makes a little bit of a challenge in relationships. I do lots of couples counseling, and that's a big piece of what I work with couples on. It's how to have the man go ahead and be able to listen without fixing. And then for us women, I also work on how to communicate so the man doesn't get triggered and he's able to support rather than try and fix. So again, my brother starts yelling at me and calling me names. And I tell him, Jonathan, you need to stop yelling and you need to stop calling me names. This just triggered him and made it even worse. I'm your brother. I get to talk to you however I want to. Yes, you are my brother. However, this is not okay with me. And for my self-care, I'm going to end the call and then we'll talk again next week. You can't hang up on me. I'm your brother. I'm not done talking to you. Yes, you are my brother. And we're still going to talk respectfully and lovingly to one another. And that's how we're going to operate. For my self-care, this is what I need to do. I'm your brother. You don't get to hang up on me. Okay, I'm going to hang up now. I'll talk to you next week. Love you. Bye. Click. Instantly he calls back. Jonathan, I told you. I can't believe you hung up on me. I'm your brother. Who do you think you are? What do you think you're doing? He starts yelling. Jonathan, stop yelling. I'm going to hang up and we're going to talk and I'll have to block you. Ah! Okay, love you. Talk to you next week. Bye. Click. He then sends me texts. All these like angry, upset, mean texts. Jonathan, I'm going to talk to you next week. I love you. No yelling or calling names. We then, excuse me, we then go ahead and wait until the next week to talk. By this time, he's calmed down. I've calmed down. We're much better. This time, he makes it 10 minutes. At the end of the 10 minutes, Jonathan, stop yelling and call me names. Or I'm going to hang up and we'll talk next week. Ah. Click. I hang up. I shoot him off a text. No yelling, no calling names. If you do, I'm going to hang up and we'll try next week. Each week, he got consecutively longer and longer before he started yelling and calling me names. It took 2 months to do this process, but at the end of 2 months, we went through a full hour and a half of talking with each other, and not one time did he yell at me or call me names. And I said to him at the end of the call, Jonathan, do you realize we just got through a whole conversation, no yelling, no calling names? I said, what do you think? And he's like, I know, it was amazing, right? And I'm like, yeah, it was. And he said, we need to do this more often. I'm like, right? I agree. So from that point on, and that was 17 years ago, he has not yelled at me once or called me names once. Now, a few months after this happened, he called me and he said, Deborah, what you have done with me has probably been the single most powerful thing anyone has ever done with me in my life. I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, I realized that I didn't like who I was when I was being that way with you. I didn't want to treat you like that. I love you. I didn't want to say those negative things, but I didn't know how to stop myself. And he said, when you did this with me, you showed me that I can do this. I can control what's going on over here with me so that my interactions with other people are respectful, are loving, and don't have this negative consequence or outcome. And he said, it has transformed everything for me. Now, that wasn't my intention when I set out to do this. It wasn't my intention to help the other person in any way. However, it was one of the fantastic side benefits from doing this, from focusing on what I needed to do to take care of me, to take care of myself from a place of self-care and from a place that I matter. Not only do I matter, but so does the other person. So after I did this with my dad, and then I did it with my brother, I then realized, okay, now it's time for my mom. My mom was the big one. I grew up with her, in my experience, being a rager. I had gone to an AA meeting one time when I was in my second master's degree. The first one was in art therapy. The second master's degree was in mental health counseling. So I had gone to an Al-Anon meeting, which is a meeting for those who are in relationships with people who are dealing with and struggling with substances. And I went to this meeting and they're talking about all the different things that it is to live with an alcoholic and a substance abuser, and everything that they were saying, I was ticking off like, oh my God, that's what I experienced with my mom, and I experienced that one with my mom, and that one, and that one, and that one. And what we know is that many of the things that somebody experiences with an alcoholic, living with on a day-to-day basis, somebody who's struggling with that, those things that the person goes through is also similar to anybody else that's in an extremely dysfunctional home. I grew up with a mother who was a rager, and it would happen in the instant. It would change, and I never knew from moment to moment whether she was going to go be okay or something was going to trigger her. It was very rare for me to feel safe in her space and in her environment. And I remember sitting down with her one time when I was 16 years old and begging her to not yell anymore, that it wasn't working, and she just couldn't hear me. And I realized after that interaction with her that I had done everything I could to try and get her to understand, but it wasn't working. And I went down to my room, which was in the basement at that time, and just remember sobbing and deciding that was it. I was giving up on humanity. I couldn't do it anymore. So setting boundaries with her, or doing this process with her, was a big one. And what I had to get clear within myself was, what is my self-care in this situation? With Dad, it was one way. With my brother, it was another way. With her, it's going to be something different as well. Now, my thing with her is her yelling at me and calling me names. My brother learned it from somewhere. He learned it from our mother. Our mother learned it from her father. And who knows where he learned it from. So for me, yelling and calling me names was not okay. We're on the phone one day and my mom loses it with me. She gets triggered. She starts yelling and calling me names. This is when I told her. I realized that this was the time to do it. Mom, you don't get to yell at me and call me names. I'm your mother. I get to talk to you however I want to. Again, my brother got it from somewhere. You don't get to tell me what to do, Deborah. I'm going to yell at you and talk to you how I want to. In the past, this would set me off and be very upsetting for me. What I said to her is, Mom, you are my mother. However, you don't get to yell at me and you don't get to call me names. We get to be loving and respectful to each other. I don't care what you say. I'm going to do this. You don't get to control me, Deborah. Okay, Mom, stop yelling at me and calling me names, or I'm going to stop talking to you for 3 months and I will block you for 3 months on everything. Again, I had determined for myself that I needed that chunk of time in order for me to calm down and to relax and just get the necessary space from her so that I could be strong enough to interact with her the way that I wanted to. What do you mean you're going to block me for 3 months? You don't get to do that. I'm your mother. All right, Mom, stop yelling at me and calling me names. I'm going to hang up and we're going to start the 3 months right now. Okay, I love you. I'll talk to you at the end of 3 months. Bye. Click. Instantly. Block. Go on to Facebook. Block. Go on to email. Block. Had to do everything very, very quickly because I know she was going to be pissed. For the first time in my life, I felt this instant sense of relief. Like, oh my gosh, I finally have this chance to feel free and safe from being bombarded or the fear of being bombarded. It felt so good. And then I started getting phone calls from the family. Deborah, what are you doing to your mother? And I explained to them what was going on. And the response was, oh, is that it? Like, yeah, that's it. Okay. She made it sound quite a bit worse than that. I'm like, yeah, I know she probably did. Okay, well, we just want to check and, now that we know, hope all that goes well. Thank you. So my stepmother even called and she's like, Deborah, we got a phone call from your mom. and we just want to check and see how you're doing. Are you okay? I'm like, oh, finally, the first person who's called me and asked me how I'm doing. Thank you for that. And she chuckles. She's like, yeah, what's going on? And I explained to her, and she's like, okay. We figured it was something along those lines. She said, well, good luck with that. I'm like, yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate that. I then got a phone call from my brother, whom, remember, I had just set boundaries with not too long ago and had these amazing results with, right? And he says, Deborah, you've got to call Mom. You've got to call her. I'm like, Jonathan, this is what's going on. I'm setting boundaries with her. I need to do this for my self-care. It's like, but this is Mom. You can't do this to Mom. I'm like, Jonathan, I can do this. I am going to do this again for my self-care. But Deborah, and I'm like, wait a minute. Why is this such a big deal for you? What is going on? And he said, well, she's calling me and she's taking it out on me. I'm like, oh, okay. Now your motivation makes sense to me. And I said, well, you can set boundaries with her too if you want. He's like, I can't do that. That's Mom. I'm like, well, then that's up to you. It's between you and her and your relationship. But yes, you can do this. And he's like, no, I can't. And I said, well, Jonathan, this is happening and you need to make your peace with it. He's like, have you dealt with this your whole life? I'm like, yeah, this has been going on my whole life. And he said, well, how did you deal with it? And I said, well, it wasn't easy, to be honest with you. It wasn't easy at all. But what I know is that I'm in a space now where I need to have this in my relationships. I cannot continue with yelling and calling names and arguments and stuff. It's just not something that I can do. So this is what's going to happen, and you need to, again, make your peace with it. He finally acquiesced. However, it was clear that he was struggling with how to deal with this himself. 3 months go by. I reach out to my mom through email, and I say, Mom, it's been 3 months. I just wanted to let you know that I want to, again, establish this loving, respectful relationship with you through our communication and our actions, where there's no yelling and no name calling, no arguments going on. If that happens at any time, then we will start the 3 months over. And what I need to do for my self-care is take this in increments. So for a week, we'll talk and email. As long as that goes well, then we'll move on to talking on the phone. As long as that goes well, then we'll meet in person for a short period of time. As long as that goes well for a week, then we'll move on to, we can basically talk and meet wherever we want to for longer periods of time. Now, I was expecting her to maybe not be okay with it or still be upset. She actually surprised me and emailed me back and said, Deborah, I've been thinking about this and you're right. This is really what I want to have in our relationship, in every relationship, quite frankly. So yes, I am ready to do this, and I'm agreeing to, work on this with you. If I had been a betting woman, I would have given her about 2 weeks, and then she would lose her shit on me. Excuse my language. However, it's appropriate. So not only did she make it that 2 weeks, it has been, again, about 17 years. And in that whole 17 years, there's only one time that she actually started yelling at me. And it was something that both of us had gotten triggered. I ended it immediately, walked away, and then we came back, apologized to one another, and recommitted to our relationship with each other. Again, it's been 17 years. I remember one time when I was starting my private practice, and she and I were Zooming a lot with each other at the time. And I was talking with her so much, I said to her out of the blue, I'm like, Mom, I feel like our relationship has just transformed. I feel like you are my best friend. This is amazing for me. And I like to ask this question of people. what do you think has changed, like, and made this possible? And she says, you know, Deborah, I finally started listening to you. This hit me. I just was not expecting her to say that. And I started laughing. And then I laughed harder and harder. And I laughed so hard that I fell off the chair and onto the floor. And she says, I know, it's okay. It took me a while, but I finally got there. Each relationship that we have, no matter what the dynamic, I can give you endless stories where I have worked with clients. And when they implement these simple skills, they see the results over and over and over again. And in the seemingly most impossible of situations, it works out. When you take care of yourself and you use the healthy boundaries and these concepts, life works out. Even though these are very simple drawings that I'm doing, I realize how complex doing healthy boundaries and self-care can get. However, you are more powerful than you realize to create what it is you want to inside of self-care and the fact that you matter. It will work out. All right, for more information, again, you can contact me through phone or email. I also am going to recommend go get my book, Bloom, You Are More Powerful Than You Realize. It's selling on Amazon.com. I look forward to hearing from you and hope you have a wonderful day.